Your Honor, I would like to talk about the first time that I ever met or even heard of the name Matthew Roberts, if that would be okay with the court. I would like to submit this as Exhibit A and enter it into court as evidence. Would that be okay? Thank you. What the court is looking at is the personal property of Charles Manson. It was mailed to him in state prison by a person going by the name of Lawrence Alexander Manson. And he put a question mark behind that. He was living on 5632 Van Nuys Boulevard, number 347, in Van Nuys, California, 91401. It was written in the hand of this man, going by the name of Alexander Manson. When Charles Manson mailed me this piece of paper, and in it he said, "Go find my son," that was the first time that I ever heard of the name Matthew. It wasn't even Matthew then. It was Lawrence Alexander Manson. So he first started out as Lawrence Alexander Manson. And yes, Your Honor, I went to that address on Van Nuys Boulevard, and I found out nobody lived there, because it was one of those post office box things where you can have an address and make it look like you're living there, but it was just a front for a post office box. The guy was telling stories that Manson said could have been true. I didn't disbelieve him. I believed him, and I was happy for him as well. Anybody who finds their parents, or their parents find their son, or well, I'm happy for them. I can imagine what it would be like not to know who your parents are. I mean, CNN even put out a picture with half of Robert's face, half of Manson's face, and you can't really tell them apart. They look like each other. I got Matthew to sign this one for me. That was back in 2003. For a few years, they would write letters back and forth. Being as how this dude was claiming that he was his son. Here's how it could have happened. Hey, if you ever need, attire to go to court, this is a suit jacket I wore in court. You want to know who I'm wearing? It's called Goodwill. I panicked. I didn't know where to go get clothes at. I didn't have a suit in my closet. I don't have a suit. I ain't ready to die yet. I panicked. I thought, where can I go buy a suit? Because I needed like 3 of them. This is the one I wore the second time. The first one you see in all the pictures. Goodwill, both of them. Yeah, so if you're ever in need of a suit really quick, hit Goodwill. And this one here, it says it's even had the tags on it and everything. It says it's 100% spun silk. Yeah. So if you ever need any, if you need to go to court in a hurry and you want to look halfway decent, hit up Goodwill. And they have ties too. Yeah, and it cost me all of about, seriously, out the door, it cost me about $10 to dress for court. So now you know that. Let's get back to this. I'm sorry. Strike that from the Goodwill from the record. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent about my clothes, Your Honor. Yes, this has something to do with this case. It leads to the fact that Jason already knew about the DNA. Yes, as a matter of fact, I do have 2 more exhibits. Can I add this as Exhibit 2 into evidence? And it is the DNA test. And this into Exhibit 3. It's an affidavit for the person who took the DNA test, and the test was with Charles Manson. Okay. Let's proceed. Okay, Your Honor. It was all well and good until the point when Charles Manson found out that Matthew said that how he met his mom was by an assault. That made Manson mad. He was actually, at that point, he was PO'd, and he didn't really want to have anything to do with Matthew ever again. Matthew would write letters, he would not write back. And by this point, I had met Matthew several times. I met him at El Coyote, I met him at Spawn Ranch, I met him at El Coyote twice, I believe. So I'd met him a few times, and he was a nice kid. He honestly, in his head, he believes he's Manson's kid. I don't care what you say to him. I don't care what you show him or how you try to prove it to him. He thinks he's Manson's kid. You're not going to change that. So let him keep on thinking he's Manson's kid. In his mind, he is. But the DNA shows he ain't. And how did they get a DNA test from Matthew to Charlie? And did Jason Freeman know about that test between Matthew and Charlie? Can I read this sworn, notarized affidavit to the court, Your Honor? Thank you very much. Can we set up the camera over here so we can see this? To whom it may concern, I've been friends with Charles Manson for over 12 years. During the course of our relationship, we met 6 times and spoke hundreds of times over the phone. Charles often referred to me as his doctor. As I have worked in psychiatry for the past 25 years, this relationship led to the publication of my book, Charles Manson Now. During our relationship, I have received and seen numerous Charles Manson documents. I can verify that the will of Charles Manson that Michael Channels presented to the court is authentic. On February the 23rd, 2017, I was contacted by Jason Freeman. Jason wanted to know about my relationship with Matthew Roberts and the DNA testing that we had done. Matthew had wanted to know if Charles Manson was his biological father. Manson had always denied these allegations and was refusing to answer Matthew's letters. During a prison visit, sorry I can't remember the date, Charles Manson gave me a cuff off his sweatshirt that he had been wearing as a sweatband. This was a customary thing that he did. He would give visitors beadwork, rocks he had painted, handkerchiefs, souvenirs basically. He took it off his wrist, threw it across the table to me and said something like, "This is for you." When I got to my car in the visitor's parking lot, I took it off and threw it in an envelope where it stayed for a couple of years. Eventually I told Matthew Roberts about the wristband. Matthew asked if I could have the wristband tested for DNA against his to see if there was a match. He wanted this done privately and sent me a cheek swab that I could forward it to the DNA lab, Home DNA Direct. The lab requested a cheek swab from me as well, as I had worn the wristband briefly and my DNA had to be ruled out to allow for a pure sample. The lab was able to get a clear, perfect DNA sample from the wristband. They were not a match. They have the results on file. The lab sent the wristband back to me. It is untampered with. It is still in its original package. I have not opened it. I would be happy to provide this DNA sample or the lab results to the court if need be. Jason Freeman asked me to reach out to Charles Manson, as Manson was refusing to visit with him. I explained to Jason how Charles Manson was a very private person and how important it was to stay out of the media. A few weeks later, I see footage of him at the hospital trying to get in and see his alleged grandfather with a camera crew in tow. Clearly, Jason has no connection to Charles Manson. If he did, he wouldn't have filmed that funeral documentary, provided Manson's ashes to memorabilia collector, sold off swatches of his burial cloth. As a friend of Charles Manson, it has been difficult to watch the ongoing exploitation of Charles Manson. I am fearful that it will become even worse should Michael Channels not get control over his estate. Marlon Marinick, July 9th, 2018. Can I approach the bench and show you some of the things that are on this DNA form? Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, there's all kinds of information on here. There's reference numbers, there's case reference numbers, there's collection types, there's laboratory protocol, there's analysis process protocol numbers, there's analysis conducted with samples, all kinds of numbers on here that if a person was to see this, they could probably get their own sort of information from this to use to maybe make up their own. So that's why, I would like to have, if somebody else in this case has forms from the DNA office, I'd like to see them submitted here. Because I want to see some of these things, some of these numbers. I want to see all these numbers on theirs and all how they match up. And there's probably an expert from the lab. There's a manager right here. I'm sure he has a boss I'm sure he's an expert and he could probably tell what all these things mean. That's all I want, Your Honor. Believe it or not, Matthew didn't believe the test. So they did it twice. They did it twice. He don't talk about it in that letter. Yes, that letter there. He don't talk about it in there, but they did it twice. And it came back the second time the same results. The next time they got blood actually from Manson. It came back the same, negative. Kind of feel bad for Matt in a way. Oh well. But he still didn't believe it anyway. Then he came up with some kind of excuse that he has some sort of alien type blood that, you know, and Manson does too. They have this alien type blood that it's really hard to match. I don't know. Keep on fighting. DNA, as of today, in Superior Court in Los Angeles County, the person claiming to be the grandson has yet to file any DNA paperwork. It's not filed yet. Until it's filed, don't believe it. Even if it's filed, still don't believe it. Have some experts come in and tell me what it all means, because I'm sure nobody else knows what it means either. This case is setting a precedent. There's no other time. In a child custody case, they have used DNA before, but in a state case, they've never used DNA before. They never have. This is the first time. It's setting a precedent. So when other cases come in, you know, down the line, and they're wanting to know about the same sort of things, people claiming to be related to people who want part of the estate, this set the precedent. The reason I want you to put these paperworks in there is because even if you are related, I win either way, because I asked for the DNA. The judge finally said, okay, give him the DNA. And then you went and appealed the case and said you don't want to give the DNA. And the appeal court said, and let me tell you how an appeal court works. When he appealed this, it goes to a different court. You have to have different lawyers even to go to that different court. That's a higher up court now. Since his people over there were getting paid by the film company, it was easy for them to take it to appeals court. No problem whatsoever. They got all the money in the world with that film that they made. You know, the film guys paying the bill for the lawyers. So we go to appeal court. He wins in appeal court. Okay, he don't have to give the DNA anymore. Well, now, if he gives the DNA in here, it shows in later trials that the DNA does have precedence. Because even the judge came back after he won on appeal, that even the judge in the case came back and says, he does not prove anything without the DNA. So you can have it appealed where you don't have to give it, and nobody can come in and just pull blood out of anybody's arms. That's what the appeal court basically says. You can't force somebody to give their blood. Okay, fine. But then the judge in this case came back and said after the appeal, okay, fine, we can't force you to do it, but if you don't do it, you don't prove nothing by what you've said so far. So, when you file these paperwork, I don't care what they are, I show precedents later on in history on how I got DNA into. So just bring the paperwork, man. All you gotta do is bring the paperwork. When you got on the phone, when you first got on the phone there and you're like talking, if I would have expected out of an MMA fighter, when you find out that your DNA matches for some whatever reason you say it matches, I would have expected an MMA fighter to say, like, have the DNA paperwork, like you probably got some paperwork, right? I would have expected you just like, F you. That's just your personality. It's just your personality, man. You would have at least shown the paperwork, because when you got Manson's paperwork for his dead body, the first thing you did showed a picture where you pulled it out of the top of the thing and you could see it and you're smiling like a... Yeah. I don't believe it. File the paperwork, man. File the paperwork. I'll let you know when the paperwork gets filed in the next video. If it was or if it wasn't. Just waiting for the paperwork. Until then, peace.